Right. Okay, today's date is May 17th, 2014. We are here at the East San Gabriel Valley Japanese Community Center. Okay, can you please state your full name and please spell your name?
My full name is Teruo Ted Hamachi. TeruoTedHamachi.
Okay, thank you. Where were you born?
Today it's called the town of Rosemead. In the time I was born, it was part of San Gabriel, and it was in the county section of San Gabriel, and Rosemead annexed it. So where I'm born, it's Rosemead, but my birth address was San Gabriel.
At that time it was called San Gabriel. I see.
Right.
What year was that when you were born?
1927.
Okay. What was your occupation? What did you do?
Oh, my dad?
Oh, well, no. What did you do?
In my, I had about 3 different occupations. First, right after camp, I was a farmer. Then I turned to become a gardener because of a lack of agricultural space. And I tried life insurance sales for about 9 years.
Uh-huh.
And then I ended up becoming a gardener in a larger scale. At my prime, I had 20 employees.
Oh, very large gardening firm.
Uh-huh.
Very good. Okay, what was your educational background? How far did you go?
Just high school.
High school? So no college then?
Through the occupation, preparing a status in life insurance, I had taken CLU, I think part 1 and 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you please tell me the full names of your parents?
Yes, my dad was Hamachi Shotaro. My mother's maiden name was Nakahara Kohide.
And what part of Japan did they come from?
Fukuoka.
Okay. When did they come to this country?
They arrived together on Christmas Day, 1919, in Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Oh, so your parents were already married when they came to this country?
Yes.
Did they? Well, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers, and I'm in the middle.
In the middle. Were all your siblings born in the United States?
Yes.
So there are no other siblings like that was left in Japan when your parents came?
No.
What did your parents or what did your father do for a living?
He was a farmer.
And you know what kind of educational background they had?
I believe my dad had a high school education because he left Japan a little bit older, so he had a high school. But my mother came to the States when she was 17. She was born in 1902, and they arrived here in 1919, so he takes a 2 years off. She was about 17.
Okay, she was quite young, but I guess that was very not unusual for a woman in those days, or to be married. Your brothers and sisters, What, where are most, well, when they were, I imagine some of them were passed, I guess.
Hmm.
Where were they living? Were they all living here when they were adults? Did they all live in the San Gabriel Valley?
Uh, Two lived in Los Angeles, and three brothers lived in West Covina. Is say right after World War II.
And what did they do for a living?
My my eldest sister married into Fuguesudo, and I have another sister that is in Hollywood, and her husband was a TV repairman.
Okay. What was it like growing up here in the San Gabriel Valley before the war? What do you remember?
I remember a lot of Niseis that were older. You know, they drove. They went. There were plenty in high school. You know, you go to high school. I was a freshman when war broke out, and I didn't complete a full freshman term, but about 3/4 of the school year I went and you could see that when you're just getting into high school, the Niseis got along pretty well. You know, they formed Japanese clubs, and they participated together. You know, I remember my sister went to like a girls' reserve. You know, it was a Caucasian woman that didn't have any children. Her name was Hazel Roberts, and she sort of befriended the Japanese young women, and she taught them about, I guess, health, you know, in their monthly period and stuff like this, where the Issei mothers couldn't explain the situation real well. So she was very informative to the, you know, the Nisei women or girls.
I see. The Roberts were also connected to the East San Gabriel Valley Japanese Community Center. Is that correct?
That's the Roberts.
'Cause they were the ones that took care of the property during the war. Is that correct?
Could be, yes.
Okay. So they were. That was a connection here.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to your parents, why did they come to the United States?
I think a part is economic reasons, and I felt that my dad came first as a laborer, and he was one of the Isseis that landed in Mexico, and they crossed the border about Mexicali, and they traveled by night and slept by day to avoid being picked up by the immigration.
Oh, so your father first entered the United States illegally?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. It's okay to say this now, so
Yeah.
he's back, you know, going on.
Yeah, there's nothing they can do now.
I know.
So then your father was here first, he then went back to Japan and married your mother?
Yes.
So when did your father first come to this country? Do you remember?
That is pretty hard. I tried to figure it out, but I think probably about 1915. And he first job he got was in drive. He learned how to manage horses. He loved animals, so he learned how to handle horses, and he drove teams in fields in Imperial Valley. And years ago, when Marvel Miyata was the executive secretary here, her father was still alive, and one time Marvel mentioned my dad's name, and because I had mentioned something about my dad working in Imperial Valley, and he remembered, Marvel's dad remembered my dad. So it was an experience. He learned how to farm in Imperial Valley also.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of Japanese in the Imperial Valley,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at that time. Do you know when your father or when your parents decided to immigrate here? Do you know who made the decision for that? Was it probably your father? Yeah.
Mm. I think my father went back, and because of the Asian Exclusion Act, coming up, and so he did go back because I guess that was a trend of the Issei to go back and get married and come, or they had Sashin Kekkon also. I used to work with my mother when I was 18 through maybe about 25 every day, whether it was for hourly wages or later on we started farming together, and we worked side by side. So she used to tell me a lot of stories about, the Issei people, and a lot of them farmed and they made money, and during the roaring 20s, that was a good economic time. And a lot of people, they quit farming and they went back to Japan. And I know of some that later on came back to the U.S. and they told me stories about making a lot of money growing cantaloupe in Imperial Valley. But they didn't grow the cantaloupe they grew for the fruit, but then they harvested the cantaloupe, and then they converted the cantaloupe to juice, and they shipped the juice back to, in freight cars back east, and that's how they made their money.
Oh, cantaloupe juice.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know that. That was
Yeah,
a juice.
I didn't know that either.
Oh. When you were before the war, in the San Gabriel Valley, to your recollection, were there a lot of Japanese?
Yes. About when I was about 10 years old, we moved because of necessity. But when I was about 10 years old, we came back to the San Gabriel Valley, and what was the question again?
Well, I was asking about, from your recollection, were there a lot of Japanese,
yeah.
Americans, or Japanese?
In the West Covina area, half of the students going to grammar school, there were about 80 students, and half were Japanese. Just like, I had an older sister, and she was going to grammar school, and I had a younger brother, and they were going, same time.
How did you, were there any, from your recollection, any racial problems growing up?
No.
Dealing with the Caucasians, or anything like that?
In fact, the Japanese farmers in West Covina, uh, once a year they had a chow mein dinner, and the farmers got together, and one time a year they would put on a chow mein dinner for the West Covina PTA. And so it was usually in the cool season, winter or springtime, that they had this. So they weren't too busy at that time.
You had mentioned that you had come back here when you were 10 years old. Where were you living before West?
Oh, we were in
Rosemead. Okay,
Rosemead.
that's right. You said you were
I
born in
was born
Rosemead.
there.
So you were in
Then-
Rosemead until you were about 10, and then you moved to West Covina.
Yeah, well, in the early 30s, my dad, where we were living, got flooded out. His field got completely underwater. It got washed out because of torrential rains in the San Gabriel Mountains. And in the olden days, they didn't have cement lined ditches. They just had washes, like where they had chain link fence, but not chain link fence, but regular fencing, and that doubled up, and in between they would put trash and stuff in there to prevent erosion. And so they were mainly sort of a glorified ditch,
Yes.
and that was the water drainage system. But this particular year, up above El Sedina, it caught fire, and so they couldn't put it out for about a month. They burnt day and night, and when winter came, there was no vegetation, and when it started raining, that drainage went through near my dad's field, and then the bridges broke, and so that spilled the water out into the flatland, and it came down to my dad's field where
That was around 1936,
it's 33 or
33.
34.
33, 34.
Mhm.
At that time, did your father own the property?
No, it was leasing.
Leasing the property.
Mhm.
So when he came to West Covina, he leased property in West Covina?
Yes.
Okay. Where, do you remember whereabouts in West Covina by any chance? Where it was in today's kind of area?
Well, we ended up right across the freeway here with the Fashion Plaza.
Uh-huh.
We farmed about 55 acres of that shopping center. And we raised some produce, and we sold roadside. And that was Highway 99.
Mhm.
Highway 99. And I think they had 2 or 3 signs. I think it's Part 60 also.
Do you know what kind of, do you remember what kind of crops your father
Yeah.
raised?
Oh, we had mostly prior. We used to grow like tomatoes, cantaloupe, onions, and that was sort of the main product. And then when I started farming, I found out that strawberries are a good roadside seller, so I started planting strawberries along with other crops like cauliflower, cabbage, romaine. Mostly this area is known to grow pretty good cold crops, and one of the biggest crops was cauliflower.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. When You said your father, when he first came to the country, he sort of came through Mexico.
Right.
But when he came back again with your mother, where did they come through? Do you know?
Yeah, Seattle, Washington.
Seattle? Okay.
And all this information I used to have to fill out after camp, the alien registration number that was still required first of the year. And so every year I went to the post office and had them pull out their pink alien registration card, and I sort of memorized what I was putting down.
Do you know the money that it took to come back or to come to the United States? Was that money that from which your grandfather had saved from working? Because it cost money to go back and forth.
I'm pretty sure he was rich enough to. He used to actually, after my mother came and we were a family, he used to send money. Maybe he borrowed the money, I don't know, but he used to send money. He would send family pictures, periodically, and he was sort of loyal to the family. He kept communicating.
Your grandfather, do you know what position or where was he son-wise in the family? In other words, he wasn't the eldest son. He must. Your father.
My father was the only son.
Oh, the only son.
Yeah, the only son, and he had one sister that was older.
Was that rather unusual for the eldest son to immigrate here and leave the family? Because then if there was property in Japan?
My grandfather had some property because during might have been in the about 70, maybe 1980. The attorney Mukaida-san was a practicing attorney, and the siblings got together and we went to his office and we signed off, and we used our fingerprints to show that that name was notarized, I guess you would call it. And we did receive some cash, money deposited into our account. By that I mean my grandfather owned property in Japan, and Fukuoka University was expanding, and finally they were looking to try to settle it. And it so happened that on my mother's side, there was like an uncle that directed the people, and I used to get phone calls, and there used to be an interpreter in between, and we used to have phone calls periodically from Japan, and they called me to straighten all this out.
No.
And it required signatures, and so I was the oldest son, so I took care of that business.
Okay, so your family then here was able to get some money from Japan from property that was sold to the university. So that was interesting. But then, but again, why did you think your father left Japan when there's property that you could have inherited? Or how was life? Do you know, or do you?
I did go visit my dad's place. In Japan, it had thatched roofs, and bare floor, dirt floor. And believe it or not, some of the pictures that she sent to that address was displayed in that building. And later, this city of Musolka, they had to put a road in, and so they demolished that thatched place. And so that was probably in the we went first time to Japan was about 1977 or 79. 79, I think it was.
Who was living in the house?
No one. No, my dad sort of gave that property away. He said that I'll give it to Azuma-san, and that Azuma-san was some sort of distant relative. And I think he was a single person, and he needed a place to stay.
Oh, so then he had no heirs then? No one to inherit the place from him?
No. It was, right?
So it was just like maybe like abandoned property
Mm-hmm.
for a long time until somebody figured out that there were some relatives in the United States.
Yeah. But my dad's sister and family, they moved to Hokkaido, a place called Anabesu. And Anabesu is the most eastern part of Japan, and it's from the beach there or the ocean, you could see Russia. An island that used to belong to Japan before World War II. You can see the islands the Russians took over.
Why did they move to that part of Hokkaido?
Well, they moved because my aunt would be my dad's sister. Husband was a rice peddler or dealer in Fukuoka, and he incurred some debt, and he couldn't get out of it the way it was, so he pulled up stakes, and he had one son, and they went up to Hokkaido to go in the dairy business. And I was fortunate in 1984 to go visit, and we stayed overnight in Anabesu.
Hokkaido is a very beautiful place,
Mhm.
very nice, very rural.
They had about 100 head of milking cow.
Going back to your parents when they first came to the United States, where did they go when they just after they arrived? So you said they arrived in Washington?
Yeah, Seattle, Washington.
Seattle, Washington.
Uh-huh.
So where did they stay in Seattle for a while, or did they come directly down to Los Angeles?
I think they came down to Los Angeles. And my mother started learning how to do dressmaking.
Sewing.
There's a word for that, but seamstress.
Seamstress, I guess.
And why I know and remember is she had all these rulers, with a curve, squares and rulers that are angled or curved. So that was to make dresses.
So then your mother was a seamstress for most of her life then?
No, well, she did sew, she could sew, with a machine, and she learned. But
It was not a career for her.
no, it wasn't. But she learned enough to sew shirts and whatever.
Sew all your clothes, all the kids' clothes.
I think so.